The Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a stop outside the Grandview Hotel's entrance with the kind of silence that only $800,000 of engineering could produce, its custom black diamond paintwork shimmering under the crystal chandeliers like captured starlight. Valets who had been parking Mercedes and BMWs all evening actually stepped back, uncertain, as the spirit of ecstasy hood ornament caught the light. Inside the crystal ballroom, Dominic Anderson's champagne flute froze halfway to his lips as he watched through the floor-to-ceiling windows, his carefully practiced smile faltering. This wasn't supposed to happen. He'd invited Amara to humiliate her, not to make an entrance. "Darling, who is that?" His fiancée, Vanessa Castellano, pressed closer to the window, her diamond bracelet catching on his sleeve. Around them, guests abandoned conversations mid-sentence, drawn to the spectacle unfolding outside. The chauffeur, dressed in proper livery, not the rental company uniform most of the guests had arrived with, opened a rear door with practiced precision. A woman's hand emerged first. No ostentatious rings, just a single piece of jewelry that made Vanessa gasp audibly. A flawless yellow diamond the size of quail's egg, set in platinum so pure it seemed to glow. "Is that the Corleone son?" someone whispered behind Dominic. "I thought that was in a museum." Then Amara stepped out. Dominic felt his chest constrict. This wasn't the woman he'd divorced 2 years ago. That Amara had been pretty in a quiet way, always slightly uncertain, wearing clothes from department stores and apologizing for taking up space. The woman emerging from the Rolls-Royce moved with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never apologized for existing. The gown was midnight blue silk that seemed to have been poured over her body by someone who understood that true elegance whispered rather than shouted. Her dark hair, which she'd always worn long and loose because he'd said he preferred it that way, was now swept into a sophisticated chignon that revealed a neck adorned with diamonds that definitely weren't from a department store. But it was her face that made Dominic's stomach drop. The same beautiful face he remembered, but transformed by something he'd never seen there before. Power. "Oh God," he breathed. "She actually came. You invited your ex-wife?" Vanessa's voice went shrill. "You said this was a business event. You said to humiliate her." Dominic interrupted, unable to look away from the window. "I invited her so everyone could see how far I've risen and how far she stayed behind. She was supposed to show up in something pathetic from Macy's, embarrassed and small, and remind everyone why I traded up. Then why does she look like she owns the building?" That was an excellent question. The Amara, he knew, didn't have a Rolls-Royce, didn't have a chauffeur, didn't have a ring that was currently being photographed by half the guests in the ballroom. The Amara he knew worked in a bookstore and lived in a one-bedroom apartment and had cried when he told her he wanted a divorce because she wasn't ambitious enough for the life he was building. This woman gliding toward the hotel entrance looked like she could buy and sell everyone in the ballroom without checking her bank balance. Dominic, Richard Moss, appeared at his elbow, the primary investor whose approval Dominic had spent 6 months courting. "Please tell me that's not who I think it is." "That's my ex-wife, Amara," Dominic said, forcing confidence into his voice he didn't feel. "She's here because I invited her." A gesture of goodwill. "Your ex-wife." Moss's expression was unreadable. "And her last name is Corleone." "What?" Moss pulled out his phone without answering, his fingers moving rapidly across the screen. Beside him, James Reagan and Thomas Burrows, the other 2 investors in Dominic's would-be business expansion, were doing the same thing. All 3 men had gone very, very pale. "Anderson," Moss said quietly, "please tell me you didn't invite Amara Corleone here to humiliate her." The way he said it made Dominic's blood run cold, like someone watching a man unknowingly step off a cliff. "I don't understand," Dominic started. "She's just the sole heir to Corleone Global Enterprises," Reagan interrupted, his voice flat. "Just the woman who inherited a $15 billion empire 4 months ago. Just the person who now controls 40% of the commercial real estate in this city, including, if I'm not mistaken, this hotel." The champagne flute slipped from Dominic's fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The ballroom doors opened. Amara walked in, and the chamber music actually stopped. Not because the musicians planned it, but because the violinist literally forgot to keep playing. She was more beautiful than Dominic remembered, more poised, more everything. But what terrified him was the expression on her face when her eyes found his across the crowded room. Not anger, not hurt, Not any of the emotions he'd expected. Just a small, knowing smile that said she understood exactly why he'd invited her here tonight. And she'd come anyway. Amara. He moved toward her, his mind racing, trying to recalibrate. If what Moss said was true, if she actually owned a billion-dollar empire, then this evening had just transformed from a power play into a potential disaster. I'm so glad you could make it. Are you? She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. One of the waiters she apparently employed in the hotel she apparently owned. When you sent the invitation, I thought perhaps it was a mistake. After all, we haven't spoken since the divorce. Her voice was exactly as he remembered. Soft, educated, with a hint of warmth that had once made him feel like the most important person in the world. Before he decided that feeling wasn't worth as much as Vanessa's father's real estate connections. Can a man extend an olive branch? He was using his charm voice now, the one that usually made people trust him. Just because our marriage didn't work doesn't mean I wish you ill. How generous. Amara's smile didn't waver. And here I thought you invited me, so you could introduce me to your investors as the small-minded woman who wasn't ambitious enough for the great Dominic Anderson. The accuracy of her assessment hit him like a physical blow. Behind him, he heard Vanessa's sharp intake of breath. Around them, guests had abandoned all pretense of not listening. I would never, Dominic started. You told me that exact phrase during our divorce proceedings, Amara interrupted gently. That I lacked ambition, that I was content with a small life, that you needed someone who could match your vision for the future. She glanced at Vanessa with polite interest. I assume this is the match you found? Vanessa stepped forward, her chin raised. I'm Vanessa Castellano, Dominic's fiancée. And yes, we're very well matched. We both understand what it takes to succeed in this world. Castellano, Amara ripitit sotfelli. Your father is Marcus Castellano, the developer? Yes. Vanessa's voice was smug. Perhaps you've heard of Castellano Properties? I have. In fact, I believe my company holds the mortgage on most of your father's current projects. Amara turned to Moss. Mr. Moss, how lovely to see you again. I trust you received the contracts from our meeting last Tuesday. Moss looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Ms. Corleone. Yes. We're reviewing them now. Ms. Corleone. Dominic's voice came out strangled. Richard, you've been meeting with my ex-wife? I've been meeting with the CEO of Corleone Global Enterprises, Moss corrected carefully. I didn't realize she was your ex-wife until about 90 seconds ago. The room was spinning. Dominic grabbed the back of a chair for support. The deals he'd been pursuing, the investments he needed, the partnerships that would finally cement his place among the elite. How many of them led back to companies Amara now controlled? Dominic, darling, you're looking pale. Amara's voice was full of false concern. Should I call for a doctor? Oh, wait. I believe the medical building where most of the good specialists work is part of the Corleone portfolio now. I can make a call. She was toying with him, and everyone in the room knew it. Amara, I think we should talk privately, Dominic managed. Should we? She tilted her head. But you went to such trouble to make this a public event. It would be rude of me to pull you away from your guests, especially when you clearly invited me here to make some kind of statement. I invited you because he was floundering now, trying to find solid ground, because I wanted to apologize for how things ended between us. I've regretted it every day. The lie tasted like ash in his mouth. Amara's smile finally faded. In its place was something colder, sharper. No, you haven't, she said quietly. You've regretted nothing because you got exactly what you wanted. A beautiful fiancée with family connections. Entry into social circles that would have stayed closed to you otherwise. The appearance of success. She stepped closer, and Dominic found himself stepping back. What you didn't count on, Amara continued, her voice still soft but carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom, was that the quiet, unambitious wife you discarded might have been quiet for reasons that had nothing to do with lack of ambition. What reasons? The question came out as a whisper. Amara's smile returned, but it wasn't kind. Because my grandmother taught me that real power doesn't need to announce itself. It simply exists, and the people who matter recognize it without being told. She turned to address the room at large. Thank you all for such a warm welcome. I'm afraid I can't stay long. I have an early meeting tomorrow with the board of directors. We're finalizing the acquisition of several properties that recently became available. Her eyes flicked to Vanessa. I believe some of them are Castellano developments that are facing foreclosure. Vanessa's face went white. But before I go, Amara continued, I should mention that Corleone Global Enterprises is actively seeking investment opportunities. Mr. Moss, Mr. Reagan, Mr. Burrows, if you're interested in discussing partnerships with companies that have actual assets rather than smoke and mirrors, my assistant will be in touch to schedule meetings. The three investors nodded like puppets. Dominic watched his carefully constructed evening collapse in real time. Amara, wait, but she was already walking toward the door, her head high, her diamond catching the light like a small sun. She paused at the threshold and looked back one last time. Oh, and Dominic? The ballroom rental fee has been waived for tonight. Consider it my wedding gift to you and Vanessa. I do hope you'll be very happy together. Then she was gone, leaving behind a room full of whispers and a man who just realized he'd invited the most powerful person in the city to his humiliation party. And she turned it into his funeral instead. If you're dying to know how Dominic got himself into this mess, and how Amara became the woman who just destroyed him with nothing but a smile and the truth, hit that subscribe button now. Comment below and tell me, should Amara give him a second chance or let him drown? And smash that like button, because what's coming next will show you exactly how a queen is made from the ashes of a broken marriage. Amara sat in the back of the Rolls Royce as it pulled away from the Grandview Hotel, her hands perfectly still in her lap, her breathing controlled and even. The composure lasted exactly 3 blocks. Then she started shaking. Pull over, she told Marcus, her chauffeur. Please. The car glided to a stop along a quiet side street. Marcus, who'd worked for her grandmother for 30 years before transferring his loyalty to Amara, said nothing, just handed her a bottle of water and a cloth handkerchief, then gave her privacy by stepping out to make a phone call. Amara pressed the handkerchief to her face and allowed herself 60 seconds of trembling before she pulled herself together. This was a trick her grandmother had taught her. Feel the emotion. Acknowledge it. Give it a brief moment to exist. Then put it away and do what needs to be done. She'd gotten very good at 60-second breakdowns over the past 4 months. Her phone buzzed. A text from the only person besides Marcus who had this number. Isabel, tell me you destroyed him. Despite everything, Amara smiled. Isabel Hagen had been her executive assistant for exactly 3 weeks, but in that short time, she'd proven to be fiercely protective, ruthlessly efficient, and possessed of a dark sense of humor that Amara desperately needed. Amara, I told him I'm waiving the ballroom rental fee as a wedding gift. Isabel, savage. I love it. Are you okay? That was the question, wasn't it? Amara looked out the window at the city lights, at the buildings her grandmother had quietly acquired over 5 decades, at the empire she'd built in the shadows, while everyone assumed she was just another eccentric old woman. Was she okay? 2 years ago, when Dominic had asked for a divorce, Amara had been working part-time at Green's Books, a small independent bookstore she loved. She'd had a degree in literature from a state school, a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that was up and coming, which meant affordable, and a husband who grew more distant every day. She'd also had a secret. Her grandmother was Victoria Corleone, founder of one of the largest private business empires in the nation. But Victoria had been estranged from Amara's father before Amara was born, and it wasn't until Amara's parents died in a car accident when she was 23 that Victoria had reached out. Their relationship had been complicated. Victoria was brilliant, ruthless, and utterly uninterested in displays of sentiment. She'd offered to pay for Amara to attend business school, to groom her as an heir, to bring her into the family business. Amara had said no. She wanted to build her own life, make her own choices, be valued for who she was rather than whose granddaughter she was. She'd wanted normalcy, love, a partnership with someone who saw her, not her potential inheritance. So she'd worked at the bookstore, lived simply, and never told Dominic about the grandmother who sent brief emails every few months and called once a year on Amara's birthday. Looking back, Amara could see all the signs she'd ignored. The way Dominic had pursued her with such intensity, then lost interest the moment they were married. How he discouraged her from working, then criticized her for lacking ambition. The way he'd slowly isolated her from friends, made her feel small, convinced her that she was lucky he'd chosen her at all. Classic manipulation. She recognized it now, but at the time, she just felt confused and desperately sad. The divorce had been brutal. Dominic had wanted to make sure she got as little as possible, even though there wasn't much to split. He'd painted her as a gold digger who'd trapped him, despite the fact that he'd been the one to propose after 6 weeks of dating. Amara had signed whatever papers his lawyer put in front of her. She'd taken nothing but her books and clothes. She'd moved into a studio apartment and picked up extra shifts at the bookstore and told herself that freedom was worth the poverty. And then, 3 months after the divorce was finalized, she'd gotten a call. Victoria Corleone had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She had 3 months to live, maybe less, and she wanted to see her granddaughter. Amara had taken a bus to the private hospital where Victoria was being treated, expecting to have a brief, awkward conversation with a dying woman she barely knew. Instead, she found her grandmother sitting up in bed, looking frail but still formidable, with papers spread across her lap and a team of lawyers hovering nearby. "I'm dying," Victoria had said without preamble, "and I need to know if you're going to waste my life's work or build on it. I don't understand. Everything I build goes to you. The entire empire. $15 billion in assets. Give or take a few hundred million, depending on the market." Victoria's eyes, still sharp despite the pain medication, had studied Amara carefully. "The question is whether you're strong enough to handle it. I don't know anything about running a business empire. Neither did I when I started. I learned. So will you, if you're not a coward." The word had stung. Amara had felt her spine straighten. "I'm not a coward. Prove it. Spend my last 3 months learning everything I can teach you. Take over when I'm gone. Build something that matters. Or walk away now, and I'll donate everything to charity and let the lawyers figure it out." It should have been an easy choice. $15 billion. Power beyond imagining. Security for the rest of her life. But Amara had looked at her grandmother and seen something that terrified her. A woman who'd sacrificed everything for success. Who'd died alone in a hospital room with lawyers instead of family. Who'd built an empire but lost her daughter, her son-in-law, and nearly lost her granddaughter in the process. "If I say yes," Amara had asked, "can I do it differently than you did? Can I build something without losing myself?" Victoria had smiled for the first time. "If you can figure out how, you'll be a better businesswoman than I ever was." So Amara had said yes. The next 3 months had been the most intense education of her life. Victoria had introduced her to every key player in the organization, had walked her through decades of decisions, strategies, victories, and failures, had taught her not just how to run a business, but how to read people, how to negotiate, how to recognize loyalty and spot betrayal. "The mistake people make," Victoria had told her during one of their last conversations, "is thinking power comes from being loud, from being aggressive. Real power comes from information, patience, and knowing exactly when to strike." She died on a Tuesday morning with Amara holding her hand, her last words a whisper, "Make me proud." Amara had inherited everything that afternoon. The lawyers had been skeptical. The board of directors had been openly hostile. The media, when they'd finally discovered that Victoria Corleone had a previously unknown heir, had been ravenous for any scrap of information. But Amara had learned from the best. She'd been quiet, patient, and ruthlessly competent. She'd made no dramatic changes, just steady, careful decisions that proved she understood the business. Within 2 months, the skepticism had faded. Within 3, even the most resistant board members had started to fall in line. And through it all, she'd thought about Dominic. About the man who'd told her she lacked ambition, who'd made her feel worthless, who'd convinced her she should be grateful for his attention. She'd thought about him a lot, which was why, when his invitation had arrived, she'd known exactly what it was. A trap, a performance, a chance for him to show his new world how far he'd risen by demonstrating how low his ex-wife had remained. He'd expected her to be humiliated. Instead, she'd humiliated him. Amara texted Isabel back, "I'm fine. See you tomorrow at 8. Marcus returned to the car. "Oh, Miss Corleone? Actually, I'd like to make a stop first." She gave him an address in a neighborhood that made his eyebrows rise slightly, but he simply nodded and pulled back into traffic. 20 minutes later, they stopped in front of Green's Books. The shop was closed, but Amara could see light in the upstairs apartment where the owner, Margaret Green, lived. Amara got out of the car and knocked on the side door. Margaret appeared a moment later, a tiny woman in her 70s with reading glasses on a chain and ink-stained fingers. Her eyes widened when she saw Amara. "Good Lord, child. What are you doing here dressed like the Queen of England?" Despite everything, Amara laughed. Margaret was one of the few people who still treated her exactly the same as she always had. I went to a party. It was terrible. Can I come in? Of course. Margaret's apartment smelled like old books and chamomile tea. Amara sat on the familiar worn couch and accepted a mug, feeling the tension in her shoulders finally start to ease. You saw him, didn't you? Margaret asked. Your ex-husband. He invited me to humiliate me in front of his new fiancée and his investors. Did it work? No. Amara wrapped her hands around the warm mug. I humiliated him instead. Good. Margaret's voice was fierce. That boy never deserved you. Even when you were just my part-time bookstore clerk, I could see you were meant for greater things. I love working here. It was the happiest I've been in years. Past tense. Amara considered. I love what I'm building now. It's terrifying and exhausting, and sometimes I wake up at 3 in the morning convinced I'm going to fail. But it's mine. I'm creating something that matters. And I'm doing it as myself, not as someone's wife or someone's shadow. Margaret studied her carefully. Your grandmother would be proud. I hope so. Amara set down her tea. Margaret, I need to ask you something. The bookstore is struggling, isn't it? The older woman's face tightened. I'm managing. The building's owner raised your rent twice in the past year, and the big chain bookstore that opened 3 blocks away is cutting into your sales. I'll figure it out. I always do. What if you didn't have to figure it out alone? Amara pulled out her phone and opened a document. Corleone Global Enterprises has a community investment division. We provide capital to small businesses that serve important cultural functions but struggle to compete with corporate chains. I'd like to buy this building, lock in your rent at the current rate for the next 20 years, and provide funding for renovations and inventory expansion. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Amara, I can't accept charity. It's not charity. It's an investment. This bookstore matters. It's where people come to discover ideas, to find comfort, to connect with stories that change their lives. That has value, real value, and I want to protect it. Why? Amara thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, lost and small and convinced she had nothing to offer the world. She thought about the hours she'd spent in this bookstore, surrounded by proof that quiet things could be powerful, that gentle things could be revolutionary. Because you gave me a job when I needed one. You treated me with kindness when my husband was teaching me to feel worthless. And you taught me that there are different kinds of power in this world. Amara met Margaret's eyes. I'm rich now, obscenely rich, and I get to decide what I do with that wealth. I choose to protect the things and people that matter. Margaret pulled her into a hug. Your grandmother raised a good woman. Actually, Amara said softly, you helped with that too. She left 20 minutes later, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Marcus held a car door for her. Home now, Miss Corleone? Yes. And Marcus? Thank you for everything tonight. It was my pleasure. He smiled. Watching you put that young man in his place reminded me very much of your grandmother in her prime. As the Rolls-Royce glided through the nighttime streets, Amara thought about Dominic's face when he'd realized who she'd become, about the power she now held, about the revenge that would be so easy to take. She could destroy him with a phone call, could tank every deal he was working on, could make sure every door in the city slammed in his face. It would be satisfying, but it would also make her exactly like the people who'd hurt her, the people who used power as a weapon instead of a tool. Her grandmother had built an empire on ruthlessness. Amara intended to build hers on something different. Justice, yes. Consequences, absolutely. But not cruelty. There was a difference. And if Dominic was smart, he'd learn that difference very quickly. Because the woman he'd underestimated was just getting started. Dominic Anderson's world started crumbling at 7:30 for the next morning. He woke to 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and an email from Richard Moss with the subject line, "We need to talk." Immediately, beside him, Vanessa was still asleep, her blonde hair spread across the silk pillowcase, her face peaceful in a way that made him irrationally angry. How could she sleep when everything was falling apart? He slipped out of bed and went to his home office, closing the door before dialing Moss back. The investor answered on the first ring. "Tell me you didn't know," Moss said without preamble. "Tell me you had no idea your ex-wife was Amara Corleone." Dominic's jaw clenched. "I knew her grandmother's name was Victoria Corleone. I didn't know who that was." Amara never talked about her family. Because you never asked, apparently. Moss's voice was cold. Do you have any idea how this looks? I've been courting investment opportunities with Anderson Holdings for 6 months. 6 months of meetings and presentations and due diligence. And now I find out that the man asking for my money recently divorced the heir to one of the largest fortunes in the country. That raises questions, Anderson. What kind of questions? The kind about your judgment, your character, your ability to recognize value when it's standing right in front of you. Moss paused. Reagan and Burroughs are pulling out of the deal. They don't want to be associated with someone who publicly humiliated Amara Corleone. The room tilted. Richard, please. This is a misunderstanding. I invited Amara to the soirée as a gesture of goodwill. You invited her to make yourself look successful by comparison. Everyone in that ballroom knew it. And now everyone in the city knows it because 3 people posted videos of her little speech to social media. You're trending, Anderson, and not in a good way. Dominic pulled up Twitter with shaking hands. Sure enough, there he was. Hashtag Dominic Anderson was trending, along with hashtag Amara Corleone and hashtag Karma is a Queen. The videos were everywhere. Amara in her stunning gown, speaking with quiet authority about waiving his ballroom rental fee. The moment his face had gone pale. Vanessa's expression when Amara mentioned the Castellano foreclosures. And the comments. Thousands of them. Imagine divorcing a literal billionaire because you thought you could do better. This man really invited his ex-wife to mock her and found out she owns the building. I am deceased. The way she smiled and destroyed him with kindness. That's power. His phone buzzed with an incoming call. James Reagan. I have to go, Moss said. My advice? Apologize to Amara Corleone. Publicly and sincerely. It's the only chance you have of salvaging your reputation. The line went dead. Dominic answered Reagan's call, but the conversation was brief and brutal. The investment was off. Reagan's partners didn't want to associate with the PR nightmare Dominic had become. Thomas Burroughs didn't even call, just sent a 2-sentence email withdrawing from all pending deals. By 9 a.m., Dominic had lost 3 major investors, 2 potential partnerships, and his appearance at a real estate conference next month. The organizers cited scheduling conflicts, but the message was clear. He was toxic. Vanessa found him at his desk, staring at his computer screen in numb disbelief. Daddy's furious, she announced, waving her phone. He's getting calls from creditors. Apparently, several of his projects are in trouble, and he was counting on refinancing through connections you promised to make. Connections that are now ghosting him because of last night. Vanessa, I'm dealing with a crisis here. So is my father. And he's saying it's your fault. Her eyes were hard. You told us you had everything under control, that your ex-wife was nobody, that this soirée would establish you as a serious player. I thought she was nobody, Dominic snapped. She worked in a bookstore, for God's sake. She lived in a studio apartment. She never mentioned having money. Maybe because she wanted someone to love her for herself instead of her bank account. Vanessa's voice dripped with contempt. Did that ever occur to you? Rich people don't hide their money. They use it. They show it off. Why would she pretend to be poor? I don't know, Dominic. Why don't you ask her? Oh wait, you can't because you spent last night trying to humiliate her in front of 100 people. Vanessa swept out of the office, slamming the door behind her. Dominic sat in silence, his mind racing. There had to be a way to fix this, to salvage his reputation and his business deals. He'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let it all collapse because of one miscalculation. He pulled up Amara's contact information. The old number was disconnected, but he had an email address from the divorce proceedings. He typed carefully, deleting and rewriting 3 times before settling on. Amara, I owe you an apology. What I did last night was wrong. I let my ego and insecurity drive me to hurt someone who never deserved it. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway. Please give me a chance to make this right. Dominic. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. The response came back in less than 5 minutes. Mr. Anderson, this email address is monitored by Ms. Corleone's legal team. Your message has been forwarded to the appropriate parties. Please direct all future communications through official channels. Isabel Hagen, executive assistant to the CEO, Corleone Global Enterprises. Even her assistant was shutting him out. Dominic's phone rang again. His business partner, Michael Torres. We have a problem, Michael said without greeting. I just got off the phone with West Side Properties. They're terminating our lease on the office building. They can't do that. We have 2 years left on the contract. They're invoking the morality clause. Apparently, bringing negative publicity that affects the building's reputation gives them grounds for termination. We have 30 days to vacate. Dominic's head was pounding. This is insane. One bad night, and my entire business is collapsing. It's not the night, Dom. It's who you humiliated. Amara Corleone isn't just rich. She's connected. Her companies have relationships with every major player in the city. When she waived your ballroom fee and mentioned those Castellano foreclosures, she was sending a message. What message? That she can destroy you without breaking a sweat. And apparently, she doesn't even need to do it herself. The entire business community is doing it for her. After Michael hung up, Dominic sat in his office and tried to figure out where it had all gone wrong. He'd been so careful, so strategic. He'd married Amara because she'd seemed safe, pretty, kind, undemanding. The kind of wife who'd support his ambitions without having any of her own. And when she turned out to be too content with their small life, too uninterested in the social climbing he craved, he traded her in for Vanessa. Vanessa, whose father had connections, whose family name opened doors, who understood that marriage was a business partnership as much as a romantic one. It all made perfect sense. Except he'd somehow missed that his first wife was sitting on a fortune that made the Castellanos look middle class. How? How had she hidden it so completely? Dominic pulled up old photos from their marriage. Amara at their tiny courthouse wedding, wearing a simple white dress. Amara in their cramped apartment, cooking dinner in a kitchen barely big enough for one person. Amara at the bookstore, shelving returns with ink on her fingers. She'd seemed genuinely happy. Not like someone slumming it or playing a role. Like someone who actually enjoyed that life. What kind of billionaire heiress chose to work retail and live in poverty? Unless she hadn't been a billionaire heiress when they were married. Dominic pulled up news articles about Victoria Corleone's death. She died 4 months ago. The inheritance had been finalized 3 months ago, right around the time he'd started planning the soirée. So Amara had been nobody when he divorced her. She'd only become someone after. The timing was almost funny. If he'd waited 6 more months to end their marriage, he'd be married to a billionaire right now instead of scrambling to save his failing business. A knock on the office door interrupted his spiral. Vanessa entered without waiting for permission. "We need to talk," she said, and her voice had that flat quality that meant bad news. "If this is about your father, it's about us." She sat down across from him, her posture perfect, her expression neutral. "I've been thinking about the engagement, about whether this relationship makes sense anymore." Dominic's stomach dropped. "Vanessa, please. I know last night was a disaster, but I can fix this." "How?" "You've lost your investors, your office lease, your reputation. My father is furious because his projects are in jeopardy. And you're trending on social media as the man who was too stupid to recognize a billionaire when he was married to one." She examined her manicure. "I agreed to marry you because you were supposed to be on your way up, but you're on your way down, Dominic. I don't date down. So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I need to think about what's best for my future. And right now, that might not include you." She left, taking her engagement ring off as she walked out. Dominic sat alone in his office and felt the full weight of his choices crushing down on him. In less than 12 hours, he'd lost his investors, his business partnerships, his office, and his fiancée, all because he'd underestimated his ex-wife. No, not just underestimated. He'd been cruel, deliberately, maliciously cruel. He'd invited Amara to that soirée, specifically to make her feel small, to remind her that he'd moved on to bigger and better things. And the universe had responded by showing him exactly how small he actually was. His computer chimed with a new email. The subject line made his blood run cold. Regarding outstanding debts. Immediate action required. He opened it with trembling hands. "Mr. Anderson, our records indicate that Anderson Holdings has an outstanding loan of $2.3 million with Pinnacle Financial, due for refinancing next month. Given recent changes in your business profile, we are accelerating the repayment timeline. Full payment is now due within 45 days. Failure to comply will result in seizure of assets, as outlined in the original loan agreement." Dominic's vision blurred. He didn't have $2.3 million. He'd been planning to refinance using the investment from Moss, Reagan, and Burroughs. investments that were now gone. Without that money, he was bankrupt. He pulled up Pinnacle Financial's ownership structure, even though he already knew what he'd find. Subsidiary of Corleone Global Enterprises. Amara owned the company, demanding repayment. This wasn't coincidence. This was strategy. She wasn't just letting the business community turn against him. She was actively orchestrating his destruction. Dominic grabbed his car keys. He drove to the Corleone Global Enterprises headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in the financial district. Security stopped him at the reception desk. "I need to see Amara Corleone," he said. "Please. It's urgent." The receptionist, a polished woman in her 30s, gave him a look that suggested she knew exactly who he was. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but Ms. Corleone doesn't take unscheduled meetings. If you'd like to request an appointment, you can submit a formal request through our website. Response time is typically 4 to 6 weeks. I don't have 4 to 6 weeks. I need to speak with her today." "I'm sorry, sir. That's not possible." Dominic was about to argue when the elevator doors opened and Amara stepped out. She was dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than his car, her hair pulled back, her expression focused as she spoke to a woman beside her. The assistant, Isabel, presumably. She looked every inch the CEO commanding and confident, nothing like the woman he'd been married to. "Amara," Dominic called out. She stopped, turned. Her expression didn't change when she saw him, which was somehow worse than if she'd looked angry. She said something to Isabel, who nodded and moved away. Then Amara walked toward him, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "Dominic, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you. Please. 5 minutes." She glanced at her watch. "I have a meeting in 10 minutes. Walk with me." She led him to a small conference room off the main lobby. The moment the door closed, Dominic started talking. "I am sorry. For last night, for the divorce, for everything. I was wrong about you. Wrong about what mattered. And I'm asking, no, I'm begging for your forgiveness." Amara sat down, gesturing for him to do the same. "Are you apologizing because you're sorry, or because your business is collapsing?" The accuracy of the question stung. "Both. I am sorry, genuinely, but I'm also terrified. I got a notice from Pinnacle Financial this morning. They're demanding full repayment in 45 days. I don't have that kind of money, Amara. If they seize my assets, I'll lose everything. So you came here to ask me to save you. I came here to ask for mercy, for a chance to make this right." Amara studied him for a long moment. "You humiliated me last night, Dominic, in front of 100 people. You invited me to your event specifically to remind everyone that you traded up when you left me. You wanted me to feel worthless. I know, and I was wrong. Were you wrong? Or did you just miscalculate? If I'd shown up looking exactly the way you expected, poor and pathetic, would you be here apologizing?" The question hung in the air between them. Dominic wanted to lie, to say that he'd have felt guilty regardless. But Amara's eyes were too sharp. She'd see through it. "Probably not," he admitted quietly. "I'd have felt satisfied, vindicated, like I made the right choice in leaving you. At least you're honest." She stood. "Here's the situation, Dominic. I don't own Pinnacle Financial. My company does, which means decisions about loan repayment go through proper channels. If you want an extension or restructuring, you'll need to apply through their standard process. And will they approve it? That depends on whether you're a good investment. Are you?" He wasn't. They both knew it. "Amara, please. I'm asking you, human being to human being. Don't destroy me. I'm not destroying you, Dominic. I'm simply not saving you. There's a difference." She moved toward the door. "You made choices. You chose status over substance. You chose cruelty over kindness. You chose to hurt someone who loved you because it made you feel powerful. Now you get to live with the consequences." "I loved you," Dominic blurted out. "In the beginning. I really did." Amara paused with her hand on the door handle. "Maybe you did, but you love the idea of success more. And when I didn't fit that idea anymore, you threw me away." She looked back at him. "The tragedy is that if you'd actually talked to me, actually trusted me, I'd have introduced you to my grandmother, would have brought you into the family business. We could have built something together. But you never saw me as a partner, just as an accessory. And when I wasn't shiny enough, you traded me in. I know. I was a fool. Yes, you were." She opened the door. "Goodbye, Dominic. I hope you find what you're looking for. Just not at someone else's expense this time." Then she was gone, leaving him alone in a conference room in a building she owned, in a city where she had more power than he'd ever dreamed of possessing. Dominic walked back to his car in a daze. His phone rang. "Vanessa, the engagement is off," she said without preamble. "Officially, I'm having my assistant collect my things from your apartment. Don't try to contact me." She hung up before he could respond. Dominic sat in his car and finally understood what Amara had been trying to tell him. She wasn't destroying him. He destroyed himself. She just stopped protecting him from the consequences. 3 weeks after the soirée, Amara sat in her corner office on the 42nd floor of Corleone Tower and tried to focus on quarterly reports. The numbers blurred together on her screen. She kept thinking about Dominic's face in that conference room. The desperation, the fear. The part of her that had loved him once whispered that she should help. The part her grandmother had trained reminded her that mercy without wisdom was just weakness in disguise. "You're doing that thing again," Isabel said from the doorway. "What thing?" "The thing where you stare at your computer without actually seeing it while you overthink a decision you've already made." Isabel walked in and set a fresh cup of coffee on Amara's desk. "He made his choices. You don't owe him anything. I know that intellectually, but emotionally," Amara sighed. "Emotionally, I'm remembering the man I fell in love with. The one who brought me flowers from the farmer's market and read poetry aloud, even though he wasn't very good at it. The one who held me when my mother's anniversary came around and I couldn't stop crying. That man died the moment he chose status over you." Isabel's voice was firm, but not unkind. "The person begging in your conference room is someone else. Someone who only valued you when he realized what he'd lost." Before Amara could respond, her desk phone buzzed. Her chief financial officer, William Zhang. "We have a situation," William said when she answered. "Castellano Properties just filed for bankruptcy protection. They're citing inability to meet loan obligations across multiple properties." Amara's stomach sank. "How many of their loans do we hold?" 17. Total exposure is approximately $43 million. If they default, we take possession of the properties, but most of them are half-finished developments. We'd be looking at significant losses. Schedule an emergency meeting with the acquisitions team. 1 hour. Amara ended the call and looked at Isabel. "Give me everything we have on Castellano Properties. All of it." 45 minutes later, Amara sat in a conference room surrounded by her executive team, reviewing the disaster unfolding in front of them. Marcus Castellano had overextended himself badly. He'd taken on too many projects simultaneously, counting on refinancing that had fallen through when his daughter's engagement to Dominic had ended. The investors who'd been interested in the Anderson-Castellano partnership had withdrawn entirely, leaving both men financially exposed. "We have options," William said, pulling up a presentation. "Option 1. We foreclose on all 17 properties, take the losses, and liquidate the assets over time. Option 2. We restructure the loans, give Castellano time to recover, and hope he can turn things around. Option 3. We acquire Castellano Properties entirely, absorb the company, and complete the developments ourselves." "What's the financial impact of each option?" Amara asked. "Option 1. We lose about $30 million. Option 2. We might lose more if he can't recover, or we might break even in 5 years. Option 3. We need to invest another $60 million to complete the projects, but the potential return is substantial if we execute properly." Amara studied the properties. Mixed-use developments in growing neighborhoods. Several affordable housing projects that the city desperately needed. One community center that was supposed to serve an underserved area. Projects that mattered. Projects that would help people. Projects that would die if Castellano Properties went under and the properties sat unfinished for years in legal limbo. "What happens to the workers if we foreclose?" Amara asked. Her head of operations, Janet Moss, pulled up employment data. Castellano employs about 200 people directly, another 500 through contractors. Foreclosure means most of them lose their jobs. 700 people, 700 families, depending on paychecks, that would disappear. Amara thought about the woman she'd been 3 weeks ago, standing in that ballroom and humiliating Dominic with nothing but truth and grace. She felt powerful in that moment, righteous. Now, she was looking at the collateral damage of that righteousness. "The bankruptcy filing," Amara said slowly. "When did Castellano submit it?" William checked his notes. "This morning, but he's been in financial trouble for at least 2 weeks. Since right after your soirée. Since Vanessa had ended her engagement to Dominic. Since the investors had pulled out of their deals. Since Amara had mentioned the Castellano foreclosures in front of 100 witnesses. She thought she was being clever, exposing the truth. But she'd also triggered a cascade that was about to put 700 people out of work. Set up a meeting with Marcus Castellano, Amara said. Tell him I want to discuss acquisition terms. And make it clear that I'm interested in preserving jobs, not just acquiring assets. Her team exchanged glances but didn't argue. They learned that when Amara made a decision in that particular tone of voice, she'd already thought through the implications. After the meeting ended, Isabel lingered. You're going to save him, she said. The father of the woman who called you pathetic at the soirée. The man whose company you could acquire for pennies on the dollar if you just wait another month. I'm going to save the 200 people who work for him. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're letting guilt drive your business decisions. Amara met her assistant's eyes. My grandmother built an empire by being ruthless, by never letting emotion interfere with profit. And she died alone in a hospital room with only lawyers for company. She stood, walking to the window that overlooked the city. I don't want to build that kind of empire, Isabel. I want to build something that makes money and makes a difference. Even if it's messy, even if it's harder. Isabel was quiet for a moment. Then, your 1 o'clock is here. My 1 o'clock? The reporter from Business Weekly. The interview about young CEOs reshaping corporate culture. You agreed to it 3 weeks ago. Amara had completely forgotten. She glanced at her reflection in the window, making sure she looked presentable, then nodded. The reporter who entered her office 5 minutes later was not what she expected. He was young, probably early 30s, with dark hair and intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. He moved with an easy confidence that suggested he was comfortable in executive offices, but his smile was genuine rather than performative. Ms. Corleone, thank you for making time. He extended his hand. I am Ethan Haugen. I promise to make this as painless as possible. Amara shook his hand, noting the firm grip. Haugen, any relation to my assistant? Older brother. Isabel's been singing your praises for weeks. I had to see for myself if you're really as impressive as she claims. There was something in his tone that made Amara look at him more carefully. Not flirtation exactly, but interest. Professional interest that might become something else. The interview was supposed to last 30 minutes. It stretched to an hour as Ethan asked thoughtful questions about her vision for Corleone Global, her philosophy on corporate responsibility, her thoughts on inherited wealth versus earned success. You've been running the company for 4 months, Ethan said, reviewing his notes. In that time, you've restructured 3 divisions, launched 2 new community investment initiatives, and maintained profitability while increasing employee benefits. That's impressive for someone with no formal business training. I had an excellent teacher, your grandmother. By all accounts, she was brilliant but ruthless. You seem to be taking a different approach. My grandmother built something extraordinary, but she also paid a price for it. I'm trying to figure out if it's possible to build something equally extraordinary without sacrificing everything else. Ethan studied her with those intelligent eyes. And is it possible, Ask me in 5 years. He smiled. I'd like to ask you, in 5 years. He paused. Or maybe sooner. Would you be interested in having dinner sometime? Off the record. Just 2 people having a conversation. Amara was so surprised she almost laughed. Mr. Hagen, are you asking me on a date in the middle of a professional interview? I am. And please call me Ethan. Mr. Hagen makes me sound like my father, who definitely wouldn't have the courage to ask out a billionaire CEO. His smile was self-deprecating. I'm prepared to be rejected. But Isabel mentioned you've been working 18-hour days since you took over the company, and I thought maybe you could use an evening that didn't involve quarterly reports. There were a dozen reasons to say no. He was a journalist. She was his interview subject. She barely had time to sleep, much less date. But there was something appealing about his directness, about the way he'd asked without presuming, about the possibility of spending time with someone who knew nothing about her except what he'd learned in the past hour. All right, she heard herself say. Dinner, but somewhere quiet, and you have to promise not to write about it. Deal. Ethan's smile widened. I know a place. Italian. Family-owned. Best carbonara in the city, and they've never heard of social media. After he left, Isabel appeared in the doorway with a knowing look. Don't, Amara warned. I didn't say anything. You're thinking it very loudly. I'm thinking my brother has good taste, and that you deserve something in your life besides work and revenge. I'm not pursuing revenge. No, but you're letting it pursue you. Every decision you make is filtered through what happened with Dominic. Even the good decisions. Isabel sat down across from Amara. Go to dinner with Ethan. Let yourself be someone other than the CEO for a few hours. You might remember who you were before all of this. Amara wanted to argue, but she was too tired. And maybe Isabel was right. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Please, I need to speak with you. It's about Vanessa's father. There's something you should know before you meet with him. Dominic. Amara stared at the message, her jaw tightening. She should ignore it. Should block the number. Should let Dominic sink without using her as a life raft. But what if he actually had information that mattered? Against her better judgment, she texted back. You have 5 minutes. My office. Tomorrow at 7 a.m. The response came immediately. Thank you. I'll be there. Amara set down her phone and looked at Isabel. I'm either being compassionate or being an idiot. Sometimes they're the same thing, Isabel said. The question is whether you can afford the cost either way. That night, Amara stayed late at the office, reviewing the Castellano files. The more she read, the more complicated the picture became. Marcus Castellano wasn't just a failed developer. He'd been cutting corners on construction, using substandard materials, bribing inspectors. The affordable housing projects looked good on paper, but the actual buildings were disasters waiting to happen. If Amara acquired the company, she'd be inheriting those liabilities, those potential lawsuits, those ethical compromises. She could walk away, let the bankruptcy proceed, let someone else deal with the mess. But the workers would still lose their jobs. The projects would still sit unfinished. The communities counting on those developments would still be left with nothing. At midnight, Amara finally went home to her penthouse. She stood at the window, looking out at the city lights, and thought about the different kinds of power. The power to destroy, the power to build, the power to choose which one to use. Her grandmother had always chosen destruction, had eliminated competition ruthlessly, had never left an enemy standing, had built her empire on the corpses of everyone who'd gotten in her way. Amara had the same opportunity now. She could let Dominic drown, could let Castellano collapse, could prove to everyone that crossing Amara Corleone meant annihilation. But then what? Then she'd be exactly like Victoria. Powerful, respected, feared, and utterly alone. Her phone rang. An unknown number, but she recognized the pattern. Prison. She answered. Miss Corleone? A male voice, older, tired. This is Marcus Castellano. They gave me one call before processing me. They're charging me with fraud. Multiple counts. My lawyer says I'm looking at 10 years minimum. Amara's breath caught. I thought you filed for bankruptcy protection. I did. But apparently someone tipped off the federal investigators about the inspection bribes and the construction violations. They raided my office this afternoon. Found everything. His voice cracked. My daughter won't answer my calls. My wife left me 6 months ago, and the only person I could think to call was the woman whose ex-husband I tried to help humiliate. Why are you calling me, Mr. Castellano? Because you're about to acquire my company, and I need you to know the truth before you do. About the violations. About the bribes. About all of it. He took a shaky breath. I was desperate, trying to stay afloat, trying to keep up appearances, and I cut every corner I could find. If you take over those projects, you need to gut them and start over. The buildings aren't safe. They're just pretty facades hiding rot. Who reported you to the investigators? I don't know. Someone who had access to my private files. Someone close enough to know where I kept the evidence I was too stupid to destroy. Amara's mind was racing. Someone with access to Castellano's private files. Someone motivated to destroy him. Someone like his daughter, whose engagement had just ended badly. Or someone like his daughter's ex-fiancé, who was desperate enough to trade information for leverage. Thank you for telling me, Amara said. I'll make sure the projects are properly evaluated. One more thing. Castellano's voice dropped to a whisper. Your ex-husband came to me last week. Offered to give me information about your business operations in exchange for investment capital. Said he knew your weaknesses, your secrets. Said he could help me negotiate a better position. Ice flooded Amara's veins. What did you tell him? I told him to go to hell. Whatever mistakes I've made, I don't betray people who are trying to help me, even if they have every reason not to. He paused. But he's desperate, Miss Corleone. And desperate men do stupid things. Watch your back. The line went dead. Amara stood in her penthouse, looking out at the city, and realized the game had just changed. Dominic wasn't just trying to save himself anymore. He was trying to take her down with him. Dominic arrived at Corleone Tower at 6:55 a.m., 5 minutes early for his 7 o'clock meeting. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven, his eyes bloodshot for what Amara guessed were sleepless nights. She watched him from her office window as he paced in the lobby, rehearsing whatever he planned to say. There was something almost pitiful about it. This was the man who'd once told her she lacked ambition. Now he was the one begging for scraps. At exactly 7, Isabel escorted him up. 5 minutes. Isabel reminded Amara before leaving them alone. I'll be right outside. Dominic sat across from her, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Thank you for seeing me. You said you had information about Marcus Castellano. I am listening. He's going to prison. Fraud charges. But you probably already know that. Edo. What I don't know is why you're here. Dominic took a shaky breath. Because I'm the one who turned him in. Amara went very still. Explain. After Vanessa ended our engagement, I was desperate. I'd lost everything. My investors, my business, my reputation. I thought if I could give the FBI something valuable, they might help me. Might give me immunity or protection or something. He wouldn't meet her eyes. I've been to Castellano's office several times during our partnership talks. I knew where he kept his files. I copied everything I could find and handed it over to federal investigators. You destroyed a man's life for leverage. I destroyed a criminal's life to save my own. Dominic corrected, finally looking up. Everything I gave them was real, Amara. The bribery, the code violations, the safety hazards. Castellano deserves prison. I just happened to be the one who put him there. Amara studied him carefully. And now you're here to tell me this because I want you to know I'm trying to do the right thing. I made mistakes with you, with Vanessa, with my business, but I'm trying to turn it around, to be better. His voice dropped, and because I'm hoping that might matter when you decide whether to call my loan. There it was, the real reason. You want me to forgive your debt in exchange for turning in a criminal. I want you to give me a chance to rebuild. That's all, just a chance. Dominic leaned forward. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm asking anyway. Not for forgiveness, just for time. Amara was quiet for a long moment. She thought about the man who'd held her while she cried about her mother. The man who'd brought her wildflowers and read bad poetry. The man who'd promised her forever and delivered 3 years of slowly learning to feel worthless. She thought about her grandmother, who would have crushed him without hesitation. And she thought about the woman she wanted to be, the empire she wanted to build. No, she said simply. Dominic's face crumbled. Amara, please, I'm not extending your loan. I'm not restructuring your debt. I'm not saving you, Dominic. She stood, walking to the window. But I'm not destroying you either. Pinnacle Financial will follow standard procedures. You'll have 45 days to pay. If you can't, they'll seize assets per the loan agreement. That's business, not personal. It feels personal. I'm sure it does. But it's not. You're not important enough to me anymore to make this personal. She turned to face him. You wanted me to feel small when you invited me to that soirée. You wanted to prove you'd won by leaving me. But the truth is, you were never competing with me, Dominic. You were competing with yourself, with your own insecurity, your own need to prove you mattered. I know that now, do you? Because you're still here, trying to trade information for favors. Still try to manipulate your way out of consequences instead of accepting them. Amara's voice was firm, but not unkind. You're going to lose your company. You're probably going to declare bankruptcy. And it's going to be painful and humiliating and hard. But it's not the end of your life. It's just the end of this chapter. Easy for you to say when you're a billionaire. I was poor 6 months ago, Dominic. Living in a studio apartment, working retail, trying to figure out how to pay my electric bill. I know what it's like to have nothing. And I survived. So will you, if you stop looking for someone to rescue you and start figuring out who you are when no one's watching. Dominic stood slowly. I did love you. I want you to know that. It might not have been enough, but it was real. Maybe it was. But love without respect is just selfishness in disguise. And you never respected me enough to see who I actually was. Amara walked to the door, opening it. Goodbye, Dominic. I genuinely hope you find what you're looking for. Just make sure it's worth finding this time. He left without another word. Isabel appeared a moment later. How do you feel? Tired, Amara admitted. but lighter, like I finally put down something heavy I'd been carrying too long. Good, because you have the Castellano acquisition meeting in an hour, and you need to be sharp. The meeting with Castellano Properties bankruptcy trustees was brutal and efficient. By 10 a.m., Amara had acquired the entire company for a fraction of its former value. By 11, she'd assembled a team to audit every project and identify the safety violations. What they found was worse than she'd expected. 3 buildings had structural issues that made them unsafe for habitation. 2 more had electrical systems that were fire hazards. The affordable housing project that was supposed to help low-income families would have been a death trap. "We have to tear them down," William Zhang said grimly. "All 5 buildings. Start from scratch." "What's the cost?" "An additional 80 million. Maybe more." Amara looked at the photographs of the buildings. They looked beautiful from the outside. All glass and steel and modern design. But inside, they were rotting. Like Dominic's charm. Beautiful facade hiding structural rot. "Do it," she said. "Tear them down. Rebuild them properly. I don't care what it costs. That's going to eat into profits for at least 2 years. Then it eats into profits. I'm not putting people into unsafe buildings just to maintain our margins." Amara stood. "And I want to keep every Castellano employee who wants to stay. Full benefits, same pay rate. We're going to need them to help rebuild what their former boss destroyed." Janet Moss nodded approvingly. "I'll start reaching out to the workers this afternoon." As the meeting broke up, Amara's phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Still on for dinner tonight? Or did you come to your senses and realize dating a journalist is a terrible idea?" Amara smiled despite her exhaustion. When was the last time someone had made her smile? She texted back, "Still on. But you're buying. I just spent $80 million before lunch." His response came immediately, "Deal. But I'm going to need to sell a lot of articles to afford your company. Pick you up at 7? 7 is perfect." The restaurant Ethan chose was exactly what he'd promised. Small, family-owned, tucked away on a side street where tourists never ventured. The owner greeted Ethan by name and led them to a corner table with warmth that spoke of years of patronage. "You're a regular," Amara observed as they sat down. "My sister and I have been coming here since we were kids. When our parents divorced, our mom used to bring us here every Sunday. Said the carbonara was cheaper than therapy and more effective." He smiled. Turns out she was right. The conversation flowed easily. Ethan asked about her day, and Amara found herself actually telling him. About Dominic's visit. About the Castellano acquisition. About the decision to tear down 5 buildings and start over. "That's going to cost you a fortune," Ethan said. "It's going to cost me a fortune to do it right. It would cost people's lives to do it wrong. That's an easy calculation." Ethan studied her with those intelligent eyes. "You're not like other CEOs I've interviewed." "How many have you interviewed?" 43. "And most of them spent the entire time telling me about profit margins and shareholder value and market disruption. You talk about people, about doing things right even when it's expensive. My grandmother built an empire on profit margins. She died alone." Amara took a sip of wine. "I'm trying to build something different, something that makes money and makes meaning. I don't know if it's possible, but I'm going to try." "I think it's possible," Ethan said. "I think you're already doing it." They talked for 3 hours. About books and business and the weight of inherited expectations. About the pressure of living up to legacy while trying to define your own path. About the loneliness of leadership and the courage it takes to be kind when everyone expects you to be ruthless. When Ethan walked her to her car, he paused before saying goodnight. "I'd like to do this again," he said. "If you're interested, I'm interested. But I should warn you, my life is complicated right now. Everyone's life is complicated. The question is whether the complication is worth it." He smiled. "And I think you might be." Amara found herself smiling back. "Call me. I will." She drove home, feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Maybe years. Hope. 2 weeks later, Amara stood at a press conference announcing the Corleone Community Development Initiative. Behind her were architectural renderings of the 5 buildings being reconstructed, along with plans for 3 additional affordable housing projects in underserved neighborhoods. "My grandmother built Corleone Global Enterprises on the principle that profit is the ultimate measure of success," Amara told the assembled reporters. "I'm building on a different principle. That profit without purpose is just numbers on a spreadsheet. These developments will be profitable, but more importantly, they'll provide safe, affordable housing for families who need it. They'll create jobs. They'll strengthen communities. And they'll be built right, even when building right is more expensive. The questions came fast, about costs, timelines, return on investment. But one reporter in the back raised his hand with a different question. Ms. Corleone, your ex-husband Dominic Anderson declared bankruptcy yesterday. His company is being liquidated. Do you have any comment? Amara had known this was coming. Had prepared for it. I'm sorry to hear that anyone is struggling financially. Bankruptcy is difficult, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But I'm not involved in Mr. Anderson's business affairs and have no comment beyond that. Some people are saying you orchestrated his downfall after he tried to humiliate you at that soirée last month. Some people are wrong. Mr. Anderson's financial difficulties are the result of his own business decisions. I didn't create those difficulties. I simply declined to rescue him from them. There's a difference. After the press conference, Isabel handed her a phone. You have a call. You're going to want to take this. It was the warden from the Federal Detention Center where Marcus Castellano was being held. Ms. Corleone, I have a message from Mr. Castellano. He wanted me to tell you that he's cooperating fully with federal investigators. And he wanted to thank you for keeping his employees on. Said his workers were the only people who stood by him. And it means everything that you protected them. How long is he looking at? Amara asked. With cooperation and good behavior? Maybe 5 years. He'll have a chance to rebuild when he gets out. 5 years. Marcus Castellano would be in his 60s when he was released. Old enough to have learned his lesson, young enough to start over. Thank you for letting me know, Amara said. That evening, Amara stood in her grandmother's study in the penthouse. She'd left it untouched since Victoria's death, a shrine to a woman who'd terrified and inspired her in equal measure. Now, she slowly began to pack it up, not to erase her grandmother's memory, but to make room for her own vision. She kept the desk where Victoria had built her empire, kept the leather chair that still smelled faintly of her perfume. But she removed the cold, austere artwork and replaced it with photographs. Her parents on their wedding day, her mother in the hospital, smiling despite the cancer, Margaret from the bookstore, laughing over a first edition they discovered in a donation box. And one new photo, Amara at the groundbreaking ceremony for the community development project, surrounded by workers in hard hats, everyone smiling. Her phone rang. Ethan, hey, he said. I saw the press conference. You were brilliant. I was terrified. Nobody could tell. Listen, I'm writing a profile piece on you for the magazine, but I wanted to run the angle by you first, make sure you're comfortable with it. What's the angle? The new generation of conscious capitalism. CEOs who are trying to prove you can do well by doing good. You're the centerpiece, obviously, but I'm also profiling 3 others who are taking similar approaches. He paused. The headline is Empire Builder, How Amara Corleone is Redefining Success. Amara felt something warm bloom in her chest. Not pride exactly. Something quieter. Satisfaction. I like it. Good. Because I already submitted it to my editor. She could hear the smile in his voice. Are you free Saturday? There's an art gallery opening. Normally I'd skip it, but the artist is someone I think you'd like. She does these massive installations about community and connection. I'm free. Pick me up at 7. It's a date. After they hung up, Amara walked to the window and looked out at the city. Her city now, in a way it had never been her grandmother's. Victoria had owned buildings and businesses. Amara was trying to own responsibility. The responsibility to use power wisely. To build something that lasted not because it was ruthless, but because it was right. Her phone buzzed one last time. An email from an unknown address. She almost deleted it, but something made her open it. Amara, I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know I've enrolled in community college. Business ethics class, ironically enough. I got a job as a sales associate at a furniture store. It's humbling, but it's honest. You were right about needing to figure out who I am when nobody's watching. I'm working on it. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better. Dominic. Amara read it twice. Then she hit reply. Good luck, Dominic. I mean that sincerely. She didn't say more. Didn't need to. That chapter was closed. 3 months later, Amara stood at the opening ceremony for the first completed building in the Corleone Community Development Project. 50 affordable housing units, built to the highest safety standards, offered at rates that actual families could afford. The mayor was there. So was the press. So were the families who'd be moving in, including a young single mother with a newborn who reminded Amara achingly of herself not so long ago. "What does this mean for you?" the woman asked, bouncing her baby on her hip. "Why would a billionaire care about people like us?" Amara thought about her answer carefully. "Because I remember what it felt like to be afraid," she said, "to not know if I'd have a roof over my head or food in my cupboard. And I decided that if I ever had the power to make sure other people didn't have to feel that way, I would use it. This building isn't charity. It's justice. You deserve a safe home just as much as anyone else." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." As the ceremony continued, Amara felt a hand slip into hers. Ethan, who'd become more than a date over the past 3 months, who'd become a partner, a confidant, someone who saw both the CEO and the woman and valued them equally. "Your grandmother would be proud," he whispered. Amara squeezed his hand. "Maybe. Or maybe she'd think I'm being too soft, too sentimental, too focused on people instead of profit. And what do you think?" Amara looked at the building, at the families, at the workers who'd helped build something meaningful, at the city that was slowly becoming a better version of itself because she'd chosen compassion over cruelty. "I think I'm building the right empire," she said, "just not the one she would have built. And I'm okay with that." 6 months after the soirée that was supposed to humiliate her, Amara Corleone stood in front of her bathroom mirror and barely recognized herself. Not because she'd changed physically, though she'd gained back the weight she'd lost during the stressful early months, but because the woman looking back at her had something the old Amara had never possessed. Certainty, not in the arrogant way Dominic had been certain, or the ruthless way her grandmother had been certain, but a quiet confidence that came from making hard choices and living with the consequences. She destroyed Dominic, but she'd done it by simply refusing to save him from himself. She'd acquired Castellano properties, but she'd done it to protect workers rather than exploit them. She'd inherited a $15 billion empire, and she was using it to prove that success didn't require sacrificing your soul. Was it perfect? No. She still made mistakes, still had moments of doubt, still woke up at 3 a.m. wondering if she was doing any of it right. But she was doing it, building something new, something better, and she wasn't doing it alone. Ethan appeared in the bathroom doorway, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Ready for today? Today was the dedication ceremony for the community center. The last Castellano project, finally completed properly. It would serve 5 neighborhoods, providing after-school programs, job training, and community resources. "Ready," Amara said, accepting the coffee and the kiss that came with it. As they drove to the ceremony, Amara's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I saw the news about the community center. It's beautiful. You built something that matters. I'm proud of you. I hope that's okay to say. Dominic." Amara showed the text to Ethan. "What do you think I should say? What do you want to say?" Amara thought about it. About the man Dominic had been. About the man he was trying to become. About forgiveness and justice and the difference between the two. She texted back, "Thank you. Good luck with your classes." Then she blocked the number. Not out of cruelty, but out of completion. That story was over. It was time to focus on the story she was writing now. At the community center dedication, Amara gave a speech about second chances and fresh starts. About the difference between tearing down and building up. About the responsibility that came with power and the courage it took to use it wisely. When she finished, the crowd applauded. Not the polite applause of the soirée where Dominic had tried to humiliate her, but genuine appreciation from people whose lives she'd genuinely touched. Afterward, a reporter from Business Weekly approached. Not Ethan, but one of his colleagues. "Ms. Corleone, there's a rumor that you're being considered for Fortune's 40 Under 40 list. Any comment? I'm honored to be considered. But the real recognition should go to the teams who built these projects. I just signed the checks. They do the actual work. Still, you've accomplished a lot in a short time. Some people are calling you the anti-billionaire, the CEO who puts people before profits." Amara smiled. "I put people and profits in the same conversation. They're not opposites. They're partners. When people thrive, businesses thrive. It's not complicated. It's just a different way of measuring success." That evening, Amara and Ethan had dinner at the Italian restaurant that had become their place. The owner greeted them like family now, insisted they try a new dish, refused to let them pay. "You know he's doing that because you donated money to help him expand his kitchen," Ethan said after the owner left. "I invested in his business. There's a difference." "Is there?" Yes. Investment means I expect return. And the return is getting to eat the best carbonara in the city whenever I want. Amara grinned. Plus, he's hiring 3 new people. That's 3 more families with steady income. That's worth more than money in my account collecting interest. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. I love you. The words hung in the air between them. They'd been dating for 6 months, but neither had said it yet. I love you too, Amara said, and realized it was true. Not the desperate, needy love she'd felt for Dominic, but something steadier, deeper, built on respect and partnership and actually seeing each other. Good, Ethan said, because I'm pretty sure Isabel would kill me if I broke your heart. And she's terrifying. Amara laughed. She really is. They walked along the waterfront after dinner, watching the city lights reflect on the water. Amara thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, working in a bookstore, married to a man who saw her as an accessory, convinced that her life would always be small. That woman would have been terrified of the woman Amara had become, but she also would have been proud. What are you thinking about? Ethan asked. About how strange life is. How one invitation to a soirée can change everything. Are you glad that he invited you? That you went? Amara considered. I'm glad I got to show him exactly who I really am. I'm glad I got to prove to myself that I'm stronger than I thought. And I'm glad it led me here. To this life. To you. She squeezed his hand. So yes, I am glad. Even though it was hard. Maybe because it was hard. The best things usually are, Ethan said. Amara Corleone, heir to $15 billion, CEO of one of the largest private corporations in the nation, stood on a waterfront with a man she loved and felt something she hadn't felt since before her mother died. Complete. Not because she destroyed the man who tried to humiliate her. Not because she'd built an empire or made her fortune or proven anything to anyone. But because she'd figured out who she wanted to be. And she was becoming that person, one choice at a time. The empire she was building wasn't made of buildings or businesses or billions of dollars. It was made of moments like this, of people helped and communities strengthened and second chances given wisely. It was made of love that respected rather than consumed, of power used to build rather than destroy. And it was just beginning. If this story inspired you, if it made you think about power and redemption and the courage it takes to build something meaningful, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story about people who chose to rise above their circumstances. And drop a comment telling me what you would have done in Amara's position. Would you have shown mercy or taken revenge? Your engagement helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. So please like, subscribe, and comment. Let's build a community that believes in second chances and doing the right thing, even when it's hard.